Canada's Prime Minister says the US is driving itself into a recession with its global trade war. The Trump administration has already slapped 25% tariffs on some Canadian goods, including steel and aluminium. And on top of that, the US is planning to raise duties on Canadian softwood from more than 14% to nearly 35%. Canadian leaders warn that will send US home prices skyrocketing. Prime Minister Mark Carney is trying to reassure Canadians that despite all the US imposed chaos, Canada can look after itself.
The world woke up to some pretty dramatic moves, and they're ongoing in financial markets. So before I get to the main subject at hand, I want to spend a few moments talking about what that means for us in Canada. And I think the first observation is what's going on is a direct consequence of President Trump's unjustified tariffs against Canada, tariffs that were first levied on Canada and Mexico, and then on the world. And those measures are going to hit a lot of people's savings, including their retirement savings. And as much as this is unfortunate, it was not unforeseen. This is what we have been concerned about. And indeed, this is what we've been trying to warn the President of the United States about. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There may be some tough days ahead for Canadians, but I also want to reassure that we are prepared. We foresaw this. And borrowing on my experience helping to guide Canada through the 2008 financial crisis and helping the United Kingdom weather the impacts of Brexit, we have been taking steps, and we are continuing to take steps to protect Canadians. What you worry about in these types of situations, if you are charged with overseeing financial markets, are there problems that are being created by the markets themselves, the banks themselves? Are there weaknesses? We do not see that. We have rock solid financial institutions in this country, so they're not making it worse. Okay? So, but what is happening in the markets is they are reacting to what we have warned about, which is that these tariffs are fundamentally damaging to the American economy and by extension to the global economy. So what needs to be done in a situation like this is, yes, there's a lot of technical things and liquidity and lots of work, that needs to be done to make sure the markets function and the markets don't make it worse. I have confidence in the Governor of the Bank of Canada, Minister of Finance, they're on top of it, and also have confidence in Canadian institutions. So Canadians can be reassured on that. But what you need to do in a crisis, and I have long experience in this, is you need to meet it with overwhelming force. You need to meet it with overwhelming force. And the situation at the heart of this is uncertainty about U.S. policy, or to make it worse, is greater certainty that U.S. policy will be self-harming to the American economy and therefore the global economy if the U.S. doesn't walk back from this tariff policy. We can't control the United States. We can't control President Trump's decision. We can speak, and we do, and influence and inform. We can control what we do here in this country, and that's why we're being clear about, and we've been clear from the start in terms of the huge payback if we have one Canadian economy, not 13. The huge payback from major projects of national interest. The ability to catalyze investment in this country of all sorts. And the importance of diversifying our trading relationships around the world. And I will say in the last 48 hours, I've had a series of conversations around exactly, well, in fact, all of those aspects. Sorry, David, I'll hand back. But, so the way we need, and what Canadians, I think the core message to Canadians is something I've said over and again, but I want to really emphasize. We can give ourselves far more than the U.S. can take away. So the U.S. is driving itself into a recession, pressure on the world if the U.S. doesn't change course. But what we can control is where we invest here, how we support our people, and that's what we're doing.
Do you anticipate Canada and or North America entering a recession? Has that likelihood increased? And 3, what steps might a government take to, like you did in 08-09, make sure we come out of that recession more rapidly?
Exactly the right question. In terms of Yes, the probability of a recession in the United States has gone up significantly. You see that from independent commentators, and something that we had warned about, and I take no joy in it becoming more likely. That will have significant effects on the Canadian economy. It's very hard for us to avoid that area. That's part of the reason why in advance of this election we made the changes to EI to make it more generous. It's part of the reason why we made the changes to provide liquidity to Canadian companies so they're not pulling back unnecessarily. And I think that we're at a situation where those steps will help provide for companies the financing that's necessary in order to do. There's other things that can be done on the margin. What we're going to need to do, though, government, what Canadians will choose their government in a few weeks. My judgment, my government will act with force. We will accelerate major investments. We will provide very clear guidelines on where we're going to spend money, where the returns are going to be for the private sector, where we're going to take regulations away. I'll give you one example to make that tangible, David, but there are many more. We announced at the first ministers' meeting 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, just before calling the election, that we will remove all federal barriers to interprovincial trade, mobility, by Canada Day. We will table that legislation by Canada Day. We've left instructions for the officials to be developing that. We, as the Liberal Party, are developing that. And the first item of business, if we are returned, is going to be accelerating that, because that's the kind of certainty that you help to provide for business to make those investments. And Canada moves forward as Canada, not reading Truth Social and X and watching tweets down there. We'll take charge.
The U.S. has announced its intention to raise softwood lumber duties from 14.5% to 34.45%, which would be an enormous hit on an industry that is already struggling in BC with lowered supply and job losses. It's something the Premier says that he'll be talking to you about later today. What's your message to forestry workers in this province, and what do you plan to do in terms of supporting the industry and workers who are at this point worried about the feasibility of their jobs moving forward?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. I start where you ended up, which is it starts with workers. It starts with workers and working back from workers, and our commitment in this trade battle, and our commitment more generally, is to support workers. These tariffs are wholly unjustified. They came through a USTR process, but they're wholly unjustified. And I recognize that there's 50,000 workers that are affected by this. I recognize the importance of this industry. I've known it my whole life, the importance of this industry and the contribution to this province and this country. So I am very focused on this issue. Premier Eby and I will be discussing specific measures that can be taken. We have made very clear that we will act. We have a strategy to fight, protect, and build. And we are fighting unjustified tariffs. This is another unjustified tariff. You can expect us to fight against it. And you can expect us to take specific steps to protect those workers.